Hey guys, it's the Metal Blade 5, and welcome to my response to Game Theory's Mario's Shocking Timeline and Bowser's Broken Home theories. Now, the reason why I'm covering both is because I actually don't have many issues with these theories. The reason why I'm making this video is because a lot of my subscribers actually wanted me to do it. Now, as always, since not a single Game Theory fan realizes this, I have nothing against MatPat, and he has made quite a few good theories, and as I said, I don't have many issues with these theories. So with that out of the way, we'll start with the Mario timeline theory. First off, we'll go through my issues with the timeline itself, because my biggest issue with this theory actually isn't the timeline itself. My first issue with the timeline is in the adult era period when placing the Mario and Luigi games. All the Mario and Luigi games are placed right next to each other with little explanation given. The only explanation for their exact placement in the timeline is from Drake when explaining why Superstar Saga takes place before Luigi's Mansion 2, and from MatPat when explaining why the games take place after Super Mario RPG. The only explanation for why the games take place next to each other is because each new game references the previous one. I think that's a bit of a stretch, because just because a character remembers the events of a previous game doesn't mean it took place just before. The Mario and Luigi games also have drastically different plots to the main series, which would make them stand out more to the characters, meaning that they would remember it more easily. For example, you had like time travel, going inside someone's body, going through dreams. Also, in Dream Team Bros, Starlo mentions that she hasn't seen Mario and Luigi for some time, suggesting that other games could have took place between Bowser's Inside Story and Dream Team Bros. Hell, Luigi's Mansion 2 could have took place after Superstar Saga, and the other Mario and Luigi games could have come later. Now, my next issue with the timeline, and this links to my biggest issue with the entire theory, is the Rosalina Era. You all know why. It's because MatPat decides to treat his Rosalina Unmasked theory as fact and use it as evidence for placing the later games, because there totally wasn't anything wrong with that theory. I know this is going off topic, but so many people complain on my game theory videos that I take them too seriously, but the reason why is because MatPat and the fans take them so seriously because of things like this. You shouldn't treat another theory as fact unless you're making a continuation of said theory. Anyway, MatPat uses this theory to place Super Mario Land and Super Mario Land 2 by saying that Peach chooses Luigi, just hearing that makes me feel sick after I presented all those arguments against it, and that Mario falls in love with Daisy like in the Mario's mental theory. First off, completely ignoring all of my points against Peach and Luigi being Rosalina's parents, in my Mario's mental response, I presented the idea that Daisy might have fallen in love with Mario, but when she met Luigi, she fell for him instead. This is backed up because Daisy kissed Mario and not each other if you look at how the characters actually move in that cutscene. This would suggest that Super Mario Land takes place earlier on in the timeline, and Mario Land 2 afterwards, as you explained. I find it very weird that it would come last, since that was Wario's debut game, and he's such a recurring character. As for Mario's castle in the game, I think that it could be possible that Mario moved out of the castle because it made him a target to people like Wario, and he didn't want a repeat of the game's events. Now for the big one, the thing that everybody mentions with the theory, the fact that Jumpman is Mario's father. First off, people already came up with this before this theory. One of my subscribers, John5/Joe5, made a response to the Mario's mental theory, which came out long before this, and used the Jumpman as Mario's father explanation as a counter-argument. That's the first time I ever heard of that argument. Also, I want to explain that the reason why I didn't think of this for my Mario's mental video is because Nintendo states that Jumpman and Mario are the same person. But with the evidence, I think it is entirely possible they could be father and son. Secondly, this along with your explanation about Daisy debunks quite a bit of your Mario's mental theory, even though you say that all your other evidence holds up. So there, that's really everything I have a problem with in the timeline theory. So now for the Bowser's Broken Home theory. This theory suggests that Bowser is an orphan, and he adopted the Koopalings so that they didn't grow up the same way he did. Now, I think the idea and evidence for Bowser being an orphan is very plausible and holds up well, and ever since Miyamoto said that the Koopalings aren't Bowser's children, I always assumed that Bowser just adopted them. I only have 3 major issues with this theory. My first issue is that MatPat tries to use this theory to say that Bowser is not really a bad guy, and if this theory is true, then yeah, he wouldn't be as bad as we think, but because he adopted orphans doesn't excuse him for all the shit he's done of constantly kidnapping Peach, invading the Mushroom Kingdom, and other things that I will mention later. Now, my next issue is the use of the Mario comic. I was actually thinking about this as I was watching the theory the first time because of Nostalgia Critic's video on the Mario comics. But the issue, just like with my point in my Mega Man theory response, is that the comics aren't a good source of info because they aren't canon. Now, I know MatPat shows that Leslie Swan, one of the localization managers of Nintendo of America, was one of the writers for the comic. However, Leslie Swan is the localization manager of Nintendo of America. She doesn't work for Nintendo of Japan and isn't one of the writers for the games. If Miyamoto or anyone else who worked closely on the series wrote this, then it would have much more credit. But it was written by an American Nintendo employee, meaning that this could just be her interpretation of the plot. It's kind of like my point of the mustache only being in the French version of Mario Galaxy in my Rosalina Mass response. It's just a different interpretation of the plot for a different version in a different country. Now, for the final issue I have, and this is the biggest one, is that some of Bowser's plans do not fall in line with this theory of wanting to give his kids a mother, such as in Galaxy, where he tries to take over the universe, and 3D World, where he catches the Sprixies. Those don't make any sense with what this theory suggests. Also, what about the games the Koopalings don't appear in? For example, in most of the main series games, Bowser Jr. is the only one there if there are any kids. Like, the Koopalings haven't appeared in too many games. Like, there was a massive gap where they didn't appear in any games between, like, Super Mario World and, like, Super Mario, New Super Mario Bros. Wii. What I personally think is that Bowser was an orphan, but because of that, he was never properly disciplined because he is a brat in Yoshi's Island, so he grew up pretty much taking whatever he wanted and feeling alienated and hostile, as the theory suggests, and he adopted the Koopalings because they were also orphans. This makes much more sense to me, as it explains Bowser's other plans that I mentioned earlier. He wasn't disciplined, so he just took what he wanted and acted hostile towards it. So, there's my response to both of these theories. Again, the things that I mentioned are the only issues I have, and everything else with these theories is actually pretty good. So, with that, I'll see you guys for my next response video. And for the one I planned, I'm kind of dreading it because it's to a YouTuber. Well, not really a YouTuber. A person on the internet that's very famous that I actually like.